tell, do you see the road? I'm out to my soul into the sides whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect. Do it.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fifth part of What If Harry Potter Meets Rwby? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Asian Lion Heart 310 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Hadrian stared calmly at his opponent as he stood at the same place he was for the last 2 hours now. He looked perfectly fine despite the relentless attacks the tribe leader sent his way. Around him, the area was completely destroyed because of their battle. Raven had used every trick she knew on him but nothing worked. It was like his first meeting with Salem except less destructive. Raven was currently on her knees, panting in exhaustion as sweat now covered a good part of her body. Her muscles ached and her body was sore. Around her, the rest of the tribe was looking both at the devastation and their leader with shock. It must be the first time they saw her in such a state. The girl with blue eyes seemed particularly shocked. "Are you finished or do you want to keep going?" the man asked in a bored tone, his voice echoing throughout the camp, sending shivers down everyone who heard him. "What are you? Are you one of Salem's pawns?" Raven asked him as she tried to get back on her feet. The man snorted at her before a smirk grew on his face. "I follow no one but myself. As for who I am, answer that riddle and you will have your answer." Raven's red eyes narrowed at him at this, but she nodded her head in acceptance. "Fine, what is your riddle?" The smirk on the man's face widened before he opened his mouth to say, "I am always near, but never far. I am everyone's finale fate." "Who am I?" Everyone in the Branwen tribe started to think about the riddle's answer. Raven, was staring at him with narrowed eyes, but internally, she was also thinking of it. For a moment, nothing happened, but then, a girl with brown hair gasped audibly before looking at him with wide eyes of shock, terror and horror. Looked like someone had found the answer. "Please milady, say it," Hadrian told her with a growing smirk. His teeth now looked shark-like because of how pointy they were. Raven frowned at those words before, like the rest of her tribe, looking at the girl in question who was now deadly pale as her whole body was shivering in pure fear. "You are Death," the girl squeaked in fear before rushing toward one of the tent to hide. The second those words left her mouth, everyone froze as their eyes widened in pure natural fear. Even Raven herself stared at the man with nothing but pure terror in her red eyes. "She is a smart one," Hadrian said with a dark chuckle as his emerald green eyes flashed. Suddenly, the air itself started to change to become colder and darker just as shadows started to spread from every part of the camp. Soon, the man was nothing but a darkish figure with fiery green eyes. Many tribe members, upon noticing this, either feigned as the fear was too much for them to bear, or they fled to hide out of the camp or in their tents, locking the entrances. Soon, only 2 people stood in the open, Hadrian and Raven, whose body refused to move despite how much she wanted to. Then the woman's breath hitched when the man started to walk again, this time toward her. Gathering all her courage, she unsheathed her sword before swinging it toward the creature approaching her. Much to her horror, the blade shattered the second it made contact with the man's skin. Hadrian, not at all bothered by what she attempted to do, kept approaching her until he stood a feet or 2 away from her. Her red eyes, filled with pure primal fear, was looking up at him, following his every movements. How can you be Death?" she asked him in a shivering tone, but we could clearly hear the defiance in it. The man raised an eyebrow at this. Clearly, she was doubting him. "Well then, let's put up a show." "Allow me to show you," Hadrian purred darkly with a shark-like grin before pointing a hand to his right. "Spirit of the dead, I call you. Come to me and face the living again." The leader of the Branwen tribe frowned as she didn't recognize the language this man who proclaimed to be Death used, but her breath hitched when she saw a portal appearing on the ground following by a rain of rose petals. All the doubts she was having about this man's self-proclamation disappeared when she saw a familiar figure appearing among the rose petals, a figure who belonged to a person she thought to be long dead, a person she saw as her best friend during her years at Beacon. "Summer," Raven called out in a soft tone as she felt the tears slowly appearing at the corner of her eyes. Her leader and friend looked the same that the day she found her so many years ago, without the BLD and the wounds that and her current body was transparent. You could see what was behind her through her. But despite it, she was still the same woman she had known so many years ago. "Hello, Raven. It had been a long time, isn't it?" Summer replied from her place, staring at her former teammate with a bright smile. How can you be here?" Raven inquired with stupor as she reached out to touch her friend, only to shiver at the cold skin under her fingers. Despite Summer's body being transparent, she could somehow touch it. "It helps when you are in good term with death itself." Summer responded with a giggle before pulling her friend into a hug. Raven couldn't help but roll her eyes with fond annoyance before hugging her back. Yep, that was Summer all right. Hadrian looked at the scene with a tiny smile on his face, no wanting to disturb their moment. Raven was the last one to see Summer during her death and was also the one who bring her body back to her family so she could receive a proper burial. "I missed you so much, Summer," Raven whispered to her friend, who chuckled a bit before answering softly. "I missed you too, Raven." Then the former leader of Team STRQ then pulled herself away from her friend's arm before saying seriously, "However, I feel like I'm not completely back." As she said this, Summer was staring at Hadrian with her hands on her peach along with narrowed eyes. "Of course you are not, you are still a soul, but thanks to my power, I allowed you to be seen by the livings," Hadrian responded with a shrug. His answer got him a sharp look from the leader of the Branwen tribe, who hissed in anger, "So you can take her back at any second? Is she nothing more than a hostage to use against me?" She looked ready to lunge at the man, who merely raised an eyebrow at her, not at all bothered by her tone. Raven wanted to say more but yelped when a certain someone flicked her on the forehead. "You're being impetuous again." She scolded her former teammate before adding sternly. "He brought me back because he wants to set things right for the safety of our world, so stop being a meanie." Hadrian chuckled a bit in amusement while Raven stared blankly at her former team leader. Here another proof that this woman was indeed Summer Rose. Her childishness, however, the woman's mind then went toward what her friend said and frowned. "The safety of our world? What do you mean?" Raven asked Summer, frowning in confusion. The transparent woman opened her mouth to respond, but someone beat her to it. "I think it is best if we talk about this in closed door," Hadrian said as he stepped forward with a serious expression on his face. Raven stared at him warily for a second before nodding with a sigh. "Very well, we will talk of it in my tent." Hadrian and Summer nodded back at her before the latter looked back at the former to ask, "When will I be able to see the girls?" "Soon, really soon," the embodiment of death in disguise whispered to the woman before the two of them went after Raven as she led them toward her tent to discuss. Once they were sitting comfortably, Raven's face showed nothing but seriousness as she stood in front of them. "Shall we start then?" the leader of the Branwen tribe inquired sternly to her two guests with narrowed eyes. It took him a few minutes for Hadrian to explain to Raven what was happening and what was about to come, but once he finished, the leader of the Branwen tribe accepted to help as she still blamed Ojben for Summer's death. That, and maybe because Summer might have threatened her to do so if she didn't want to be haunted by her in the future. Of course, when Raven learned of the true story about the man in Salem, needless to say that she was both shocked and furious. Which was understandable, as a handful of people actually knew the true story. Summer, Amber, Raven, Ojben, Salem's followers, or thought that their actual world was a shadow of a greater one that had been destroyed by two arrogant deities. However, Raven had explained to them that it will be difficult for her to go to Atlas Academy like that. Why? Her semblance, kindred link, sure allowed her to create portals, but only to travel to people she was closed with, such as Taeyang, Yang, Crow, Vernal and Summer. And seeing that the latter was well dead, Raven will have a hard time entering Atlas Academy. Hadrian had thought for a moment before an idea appeared in his mind. With Summer being a soul, she could go anywhere she wanted without trouble, and once she found the location of the relics, she could use the power gifted to her by death to have a temporary body so Raven could use her semblance. Once the leader of the Branwen tribe would be there, and after retrieving the relic, she would use her connection with the girl with ice blue eyes from earlier whose name was Vernal apparently to go back to camp. Vernal, despite still being wary of him thanks to his little display, had accepted even if she had wanted to accompany her leader. However, Summer voiced her worry about something, the fate of Atlas. Apparently the relic was the only thing keeping the area from falling from the sky. After a moment of thought, Hadrian decided to give her a device that would allow its user to prevent it from happening. The device would make sure Atlas was still flying even without the relic. What the device looked like? A dagger, a curved dagger with emerald decorating it. Of course, Hadrian had menaced Raven if she tried to steal it. Afterward, Hadrian's body became a black mist who went straight toward the underworld to return to its MSTR, leaving Summer behind so she could catch up with her old friend and then performing the mission. Needless to say that once Thanatos went to the land of darkness to tell Salem the news, the Queen of Grimm had been greatly pleased with the development. In exchange, she told him how something interesting, a part of Tyrion's recent kills and Arthur's boredom, the actions of the White Fang had caught his attention. After Sienna had ordered her followers to stop whatever they were doing for the time being, Adam Taurus had created his own branch of the White Fang and renamed it BLD Fang, and their emblem looked like a wolf head whose fangs were covered with fresh BLD. It was discovered that some of Sienna's own guards were members of the BLD Fang and she dealt with them accordingly but executing them. The embodiment of death couldn't blame her for that. A part of that, his clone in Vale was having the time of his life. After his discussion with Amber, he went to see Blanche and the two of them went to another date in the streets. They greatly enjoyed themselves even if they had to deal with glares and sneers of disgust from some people. Thankfully, it was only a handful of racists people against thousands of civilized ones. However, the next day, something happened, something terrible that Harry knew would happen but was no less shocking, a massive Grimm attack. It happened thanks to Torchwick and the BLD Fang who destroyed the barrier protecting Vale by the use of a train filled with bombs. Thankfully, Blanche, Team RWBY, JNPR, and many others including the teachers of Beacon along with Emerald and Mercury all fought against the enemies. Harry himself helped even if the Grimm were ordered by Salem to not hurt him nor any innocents like she promised the embodiment of death some time ago. During the fight, he had been mesmerized by Blanche's fighting skills as she moved with a grace that almost reminded him of a dancer. A dancer with a sharp blade and a fiery temper. She looked even more sexier in this state. Anyway, the battle seemed good at first as the defenders seemed to push back their enemies, but then, more creatures of Grimm started to appear and Harry had been forced to use his semblance to chase the intruders. Needless to say, it had been pretty effective as the dark creatures literally fled with their tails between their legs from him. However, he had to deactivate his semblance as it also affected his comrades, and a few seconds later, the lovable Professor Goodwitch used her powers to seal the wall to prevent the creatures to enter the city again. Afterward, Harry was satisfied to hear that Professor Ozpin got a strong reprimand from the Council of Vale but was dread when he heard about who was nominated as the head of security for the coming Vital Festival, General James Ironwood. Our hero was satisfied when he heard about how Roman Torchwick had been captured during the battle thanks to the combined efforts of both Team CFVY and the Beacon staff Glinda Goodwitch, Peter Port and Bartholomew Oblek. To be sure that the thief wouldn't talk about either Salem or who worked with him, Harry decided to curse him. It was not the same curse he used on Jacques Schnee a while back but a quicker one. With this curse, the famous thief and criminal would not live for very long, 4 days at most. Why 4 days? Because Harry thought it would be a good idea to let everyone having their fun with the guy. Yes, he was a sadistic BSTRD. The same day, Harry got to talk with Team RWBY who told him what had happened during their assigned mission with Doc Oblek. The guy hated to be called Professor, from the moment they learned who will accompany them to the ruins of Old Vale underneath Mountain Glen. Once they finished, Harry couldn't reprimand them this time as it wasn't their fault for being at the wrong place at the wrong time. However, if they hadn't found what the BLD Fong planned, maybe things would have been worse. So instead, he congratulated them for their actions before Rwby presented him to their newest addition, a dog named Svi. He was a cute little corgi who seemed to always smile. Apparently, Yang's and Rwby's father, Taiyang Xiaolong, had sent the dog to them because he had leave patch for some times. It had been funny to see Blake hiding in Rwby's bed to avoid being near the furball. The cat Faunus, thanks to her being well, part cat, was still wary of every canines. Were they foxes, wolves or simply dogs? Sure, she had a good relationship with Blanche, and the two's favorite hobby was to tease him about how the wolf Faunus managed to tame the grumpy dark guy, but Blake was still uncomfortable around her. Anyway, as the time passed, things seemed to be good at Beacon because of the coming Vital Festival, especially of the coming tournament. Thanatos and Salem had discussed of their next course of actions. At first, the Queen of Grimm planned to wait until the very end of the tournament before activating the virus in the system, but this was not an option anymore. Why? Because very soon, with the help of Raven and Summer, the last relic will be retrieved from Atlas Academy and they will finally summon the gods, so judgment time could take place. Thanatos/Harry couldn't wait for this moment, as he had been itching to see what those beings were capable of. Salem was just excited at the prospect of seeing the very beings that cursed her being punished by the embodiment of death himself, knowing that once the twin gods would be destroyed, Thanatos would get rid of the curse in her before sending him to the next great adventure, as he tends to call the afterlife. Arthur and Tyrion, them, had been ordered by Salem to do whatever they wanted for the time being, saying that they no longer have to look for the relic. The former was happy because he don't have to work with the serial killer anymore, while the latter had been itching for some BLD lately. This guy will definitely end up in Inferno once this whole thing is over. A part of that, at Beacon, Harry knew that soon the truth about him will come out, and for some reasons was deeply afraid of how the people he grew to care a lot would react. Especially Blanche. The wolf Faunus was the love of his life, and he couldn't stand her hating him after his true identity was revealed. He shivered at the mere thought of it. For now, however, he will still enjoy his life as a normal human as best as he could, knowing that very soon, it will be over. Sure, he told Salem or Amber that it was the first time he experienced a mortal life, but it was not true, as it was his second time. He planned to tell the two when they will join him completely in the underworld. He could imagine the face they will make after he told them who he once was before he became death. It will be without a doubt really hilarious. Speaking of Amber, the Fall Maiden was still restricted by Ojban to not leave the academy, but she was allowed to teach again. Needless to say that many were thankful of that because they liked Professor Amber. Harry loved to call her that, as he knew it annoyed her to no end, as she would glare at him each time he called her that. Of course, he wasn't bothered at all by this, which seemed to annoy the Fall Maiden a bit more at the lack of reactions. However, another thing happened because of her reinstallation, her newfound relationship with one of her former attackers, Emerald Sustri herself. How did it happen? Apparently, one day they bumped into one another in a corridor and they talked. Emerald had apologized to her for attacking her and told the older woman that she would do anything to be forgiven. Amber, of course, had jumped on the occasion and offered for the two of them to go to a restaurant. It was a blushing Emerald that responded positively to the Fall Maiden. The days after the first date, as Harry called it, it was easy to see that the two were becoming really close. Our hero caught them twice kissing one another on the lips. Of course, as blackmail materials, he would take a picture of them with his scroll. Anytime Amber teased him with Blanche, he would threaten her with the pictures. Needless to say that the Fall Maiden looked like a living tomato once she saw the pictures, but promised to stop teasing him as long as he doesn't show them to anyone. He promised, but did show them to one person in particular, the lovely Blanche Moonflower. Amber had hidden her head behind her faces when the wolf Faunus started to ask so many questions about her girlfriend, and the Fall Maiden had loudly cursed Harry's name for this. Which, in return, had caused him to laugh loudly. Another thing that made his day was the death of Roman Torchwick. The most famous criminal was found dead in his cell after being imprisoned there for only 4 days. Of course, it had pissed Ironwood, who instantly questioned everyone in the prison, wanting to know how it could happen. It was then revealed that Roman died of a disease which was strangely the same one that caused the death of the previous CEO of the Schnee Dust Company, Jacques Schnee. Of course, once the news of his death reached the public, cheers of joy echoed throughout the citizens of not only Vale but the other kingdoms as well. However, things were not totally good. Why? Because P.F. Ironwood, who sometimes stared at him with suspicions if the two somehow met one another. He didn't know what he did to receive this, but, just in case, he decided to keep a close eye on him. Another thing he noticed was the growing tension between Mercury and Emerald. He didn't know why, but he had a small idea of it. Surely it was because of Emerald's new relationship with the previous person they tried to kill. But it could be something else, not that he wanted to discover the true reasons of their arguments. It was not his problem after all. Anyway, a few days after the fight against the waves of Grimm, in Th Underworld, a certain embodiment of death was peacefully sitting on his throne, enjoying the peace and quiet of his palace. It was the middle of the morning and only 3 souls had entered his domains, which allowed him to take short break in his duty. Lord Thanatos, a feminine voice echoed from nearby, and he turned his head to see the transparent form of Summer Rose approaching him. The former leader of Team STRQ, thanks to him, was now allowed to roam freely both in her domain and to see her friend Raven, who didn't seem to mind that a literal ghost visited her. However, he had strictly ordered her to not try to visit her daughters nor her husband without his consent, as he would know it instantly if she dared to. Sure, she was pained to not see her daughters already, but was a bit relieved to hear that really soon, she will have the opportunity to see them again. Even her husband. Yes, Summer, he asked her with a raised brow and a calm tone. Raven sends me to tell you she is ready, the ghostly woman responded calmly, but we could clearly see the excitement in her silver eyes. She desperately wanted to go on this quest, as it would allow her to experiment something she missed, going in a mission with a teammate. Thanatos sent her an amused look, understanding her situation before nodding his head. Very well, you may go and try not to be seen by the mortals, at least not yet, the embodiment of death ordered her sternly but gently. Understood, my lord. See you. Summer said happily but still respectfully for the lord of the underworld before disappearing in thin air. Thanatos chuckled in amusement at this before looking at the ceiling and narrowing his eyes. You both better be prepared, because soon, I will destroy you, he snarled the last part in a cold tone as his voice seemed to echo throughout the universe. At the same time, far away from there, 2 beings were shivering in fear, wondering what could cause such a reactions from 2 deities such as them. Thankfully for them, they will not know it before some time. Meanwhile, in the land of darkness, Salem was also sitting on her throne, equally enjoying the peace and quiet of the moment. However, her tranquility was broken when a spectral form appeared a few feet away in front of her. The Queen of Grimm instantly recognized who it was and smiled. My lord, she greeted him respectfully, but a devious smirk could be seen on her pale face. Thanatos' right eyebrow twitched at this, but he said nothing of it as he opened his mouth to say calmly, the mission has started. Salem's smirk turned into a pleasant smile as those words reached her ears. Really now? Yes, they just left for Atlas Academy soon enough, the last relic will be ours, Salem. Thanatos retorted with a tiny grin of anticipation on his face. Excellent, the Queen of Grimm cried out in happiness and satisfaction as she clapped her hands in joy. The embodiment of death chuckled at her behavior before his face turned serious again. I am sure you heard about Roman's death. Yes, I am correct in assuming you have something to do with that, my lord. Thanatos' right eyebrow twitched again in annoyance but answered calmly, Roman was many things, but he would do anything to save his own skin. He reportedly told the authorities who he was working with if it would get him a reduced sentence. Salem nodded her head in understanding at those words, having nothing to contradict this statement, as criminals would do anything to save themselves, even if it means selling themselves to the police. The embodiment of death then stiffened as he felt a presence entering his domain and groaned a bit. Well, I should go now. I will come back later, hopefully with the last relic, Thanatos said with a sigh, knowing that his duty was calling him. I understand perfectly, my lord, Salem said to the embodiment of death with a nod of both understanding and compassion. Thanatos nodded at her gratefully before disappearing in thin air, leaving behind the Queen of Grimm, whose head turned toward the outside, a smirk appearing on her face as she looked at her kingdom. Soon his revenge will take place. She can't wait for it to finally happen after millenniums of waiting. Time skip. Thanatos sighed deeply as he watched another soul, a child, pass through the gate of Elysium. The embodiment of death was internally angry because this child, who was only 6 years old, had died from starvation, killed by people who were supposed to love and care for her. From what he saw in her memories, she was born a faunus in a family of humans who strangely happened to dislike faunus kind greatly. Just like him many millenniums ago, the poor child was tortured, abused, rejected by people of her own flesh and blood. She reminded him of himself when he was a human child, living with his relatives at number 4 Private Drive. Just like the little one, he had been forced into labors, rejected, abused, tormented by his own relatives. But unlike the Dursleys, this family actually killed the child. Well, scratch that, the Dursleys almost killed him plenty of times during the decade he resided with them, but it was thanks to his magic that he survived. Anyway, with her being a child and having committed no crimes, Thanatos gently led her to the white gate that was Elysium, where the little one would live for all eternity. Hopefully, she will meet dead relatives who will take care of her like her family was supposed to. Shaking his head, the embodiment of death then hears someone calling him and instantly recognized the voice. Lord Thanatos, we found it, the former leader of Team STRQ said with pure happiness through the link. Yes, he created a link between himself and her so she could call him whenever she wanted, and it will disappear soon. Hearing this, Thanatos froze for a moment. His entire being was filled with surprise but also happiness and satisfaction. Wonderful. Where are you both now? The embodiment of death asked her with a calm expression. At Raven's camp, was Summer's answer. Very well, I'm coming. Thanatos responded with a nod, not that the dead woman could see it. Will he really go like this? Of course not. He will just send the clone he created when he first met the Branwen tribe. Closing his neon green eyes, Thanatos then began to focus as in front of him appeared a cloud of mist. A few seconds later, stood Hadrian Black, the oldest of his 2 clones, who bowed at him in respect. Go to the Branwen tribe and bring the relic to me, he ordered the clone in a stern tone. Hadrian nodded at his creator before disappearing in a cloud of mist. Now alone again, the embodiment of death brought his hands together as a pleasant smile appeared on his face. At the same time, in anima, Raven was standing near the ghostly form of her former team leader. Summer rose as they both waited for death to come. Beside the tribe leader stood Vernal, whose eyes showed nothing but wariness at the prospect of seeing the man again. Yes, she still had his little display in mind. Soon enough, their attention turned toward the center of the camp as a cloud of mist appeared out in thin air. Through the mist, appeared a familiar figure many tribe members instantly recognized as the embodiment of death himself, Hadrian Black. Of course, none of them except Summer knew of Death's true form, as they all thought it was actually this one. Summer had wanted to tell her friend but had promised to her lord to keep her mouth shut for the time being. My lord, Summer greeted the newcomer respectfully as she bowed at him. Summer, Raven, Vernal, Hadrian greeted the trio as around them, every tribe members left the area to go elsewhere. Try to guess why, happy face. Raven and the blue-eyed girl nodded their heads at him in greetings. I heard that you found it, Hadrian demanded as he glanced back and forth between Summer and Raven. We did. It was not easy, but we did it. Summer replied childishly, which caused Raven to roll her eyes in fond annoyance while Vernal snorted in amusement. Hadrian himself was amused by her behavior as he now saw again why she was Ruby's mother. It was not really guarded, and the dagger you have us was pretty useful, the leader of the Branwen tribe added before her friend could add something else. Good to know. I would hate to deal with hundreds of souls at once, too much work for my taste, Hadrian responded with a soft sigh. He was thinking about the time he had to deal with thousands of souls all in the same day. He hadn't slept for a week or 2 to be sure that every single one of them was judged. That's another reason of why he wanted to punch the twin gods, as it was their fault he dealt with this. Hearing this, Vernal and Raven both snorted in amusement while Summer giggled at his misery. He shot the trio a glare before asking in a calm but stern tone. "May I see it?" Raven nodded at him before looking at Vernal. "Bring it here." The blue-eyed girl nodded her head at her leader before dashing toward the largest tent of the camp. A few seconds later, Vernal came back, holding in her hands the last of the relics. The moment his eyes fell on it, Hadrian could detect the power radiating from it and slowly inspected it once Vernal handed it to him. The last relic of the gods was a golden ornamented staff with a blue spearhead-shaped crystal on top and with a smaller crystal on the bottom. "Wonderful," he muttered as he looked at the staff before looking over at the 3 people, 2 living and 1 dead. "You have done a great job, all of you," he began to say before adding. "Summer, I promised you the possibility of visiting your family." The ghostly figure's eyes widened at those words, and her entire body was filled with growing anticipation and excitement. A smile appeared on Hadrian's face as he added gently, "You are free to go see them." A squeal of joy escaped Summer's mouth once those words reached her ears. The sound caused Hadrian, Vernal and Raven to cover their ears in slight pain before they all glared at the ghostly figure who, upon realizing what she did, looked back at them sheepishly. "Sorry." Hadrian sighed deeply but then looked back at Raven and Vernal. "I have to go now, good luck with her." "Yeah," Summer began to say with a wave before her mind processed what he said. "Hui," she cried out in indignation as a pout appeared on her face. With a smirk, Hadrian Black disappeared in a cloud of mist, taking with him the relic. Once he was gone, Raven looked at her friend before saying, "Come on Summer, I will take you to Patch." Time skip. Salem was currently on the landing deck of her castle. Her dark eyes were looking at her kingdoms as creatures of Grimm were seen coming out of some pools. The Queen of Grimm was waiting for the embodiment of death to come, hopefully with the remaining relic in his possession. "Soon you will both pay for what you did to me," she whispered softly as her eyes narrowed slightly. It was said to no one in particular, but we could understand who it was meant to. "Oh, they will pay, you can sure of that, dear friend," a familiar voice echoed from behind her. Turning her head with a smile, she saw it was none other than Thanatos, the embodiment of death himself in all his glory. His clone had come back to him a minute ago to give him his package. When he had it in his hands, he went straight to see the Queen of Grimm to tell the news. "My lord, you are back and not empty-handed, it seems." Salem replied with ravishment when she saw the artifact in the man's hands. "Yes, Salem. As you can see, the last relic of the God of Light has been found." Thanatos replied with a smirk as he presented her the relic. Smirking back, the Queen of Grimm then used her magic to summon the other relics, and soon all 4 of them were levitating before the eyes of Salem and Thanatos. "With all 4 relics now in our possession, we can now summon the twin gods back," Salem began to say to her lord with a dark grin. "The relics will take them to us and revenge will be ours," Thanatos added with his own dark grin. Once those words escaped his mouth, the embodiment of death and the Queen of Grimm started to laugh like 2 mad scientists. Their laughs echoed throughout the castle, and the creatures of Grimm who heard them fled the area with their tails between their legs. After the 4 relics had been gathered, both Salem and Thanatos decided to wait for a bit before summoning the gods. Why, you may wonder. Because they wanted the people of Remnant to enjoy some time of peace before the chaos began. Of course, Amber had wholeheartedly agreed with this after she was told of it by her best friend's clone at Beacon, but she was internally worried because she knew that things would not be the same the second those gods would appear on Remnant again after millenniums of disappearance. After all, like Thanatos and Salem, she knew that the moment they arrived, they would try to destroy every single creatures on Remnant because they were not united. The embodiment of death, thankfully, will not let that happen, as he was a firm believer in free will and would protect the people of Remnant from this threat. That, and he had been itching for the opportunity to fight fellow deities. After some discussion, it was also decided that Salem would have the honor to summon the gods, as she had been waiting for this moment for millenniums, unlike Thanatos who only waited a bit more than a decade. She will do it during the Vital Festival, and more precisely, when the virus will be activated. When Thanatos asked her when she will do it, the Queen of Grimm had responded that she will call him when the time has come. He didn't like the answer but he accepted it regardless. Both had waited for a long time, so few days or weeks was nothing in comparison. Of course, Thanatos was also fighting his own problems. He knew that soon, the truth will come out and Harry James Potter will disappear from the world. He couldn't stop thinking about the expression his friends at Beacon would do once his true identity will be revealed, especially Blanche. The embodiment of death was afraid that the love of his life would reject him for who he was or for lying to her since their first date. Or both. For millenniums, Thanatos lived alone, but ever since he was somewhat forced to live with Amber, he had grown to love having some company to the point he didn't want to be alone again. Unlike the friends he had in his old world, the one he had genuinely liked him for him and not for some stupid things like fame and money. Blanche Moonflower, the gorgeous white wolf fauness, was the one he grew to love the most. Not only because she was his girlfriend and possible soulmate, but because just being around her made him feel good. Her presence only radiated warmth and comfort for the being he was and filled him with happiness, love and affection. Feelings he never felt before during the time he was a weak, puny, little human. All thanks to the meddling of an old coot and the darkness of a horrible snake-faced bstrd. As the days passed, the embodiment of death prepared himself for the coming battle with the twin gods and for his arrival in the mortal realm. He could almost see the faces the people of Remnant would make. Another person was also looking forward for this day, Summer Rose. The former leader of Team STRQ got to meet with her husband again, and needless to say that Taeyong had been, from what he heard, pretty shocked to see both of his wives standing in front of him with one looking transparent. Both women told him of what was going to happen along with the truth about Salem and Ozpin/Ozma. At first the man had been shocked but then accepted to help them in the future. After a short debate, it was decided that their daughters would not be told about any of this until the coming time. Afterwards, the three of them enjoyed their times together. Anyway, as Salem and Thanatos waited for the right time, the vital tournament was already well underway. The combats took place in the Amity Coliseum, an enormous airborne coliseum with an inverted cone shape. The base of the structure is a very large crystal that tapers to a point. Above it stood 2 levels of docking bays for air buses to offload passengers, and very large archways lead passengers to the seating area whose form was octagonal-like in appearance. Much to Harry's horror and irritation, the tournament announcers were none other than 2 professors he knew very well. Peter Port and Dr. Bartholomew Oblek. He would have preferred Glinda Goodwitch, but sadly, he wasn't the one to choose the announcers, so he had little to say about it. Anyway, the 2 explained the rules of the tournament for everyone present. In short, there were 3 rounds. The first being a 4 against 4 team round, where the winners of the team round may select 2 of their team to fight in the 2 against 2 doubles round. Again, the victors may choose 1 representative to fight in the final 1 against 1. It was pretty easy to understand. Sadly, because he was a solo team, Harry James Potter wasn't allowed to participate, much to his chagrin, as he literally pouted at Professor Goodwitch. She was the one who told him the good news, which in return had amused the other people present, mainly his friends from Team Rwby and JNPR, and Blanche. Ms. Moonflower was also unable to participate, because she was not a student but an assistant, and because she had no team she was in the same boat that her lover in that regard. Speaking of Team Rwby, they fought against a team from Haven Academy, Team ABRN, composed of 2 girls and 2 men. Their leader, a girl named Arslan Alton, had a dark complexion, platinum blonde hair and olive green eyes, who wore a yellow robe with only one wide, loose-fitting sleeve over a black tube top. She also possessed black pants and shoes and a red sash embroidered with a white, endless knot on it. On her legs and arms, she had bandages as well as a red necklace around her neck. The other members of her team were names Bolan Hori, Reese Cloris, and Nadir Shiko. The first of the trio had lightly tanned skin, amber eyes, and black hair. He wore 2 yellow sashes, one around his waist, the other over his shoulder, alongside a dark blue vest and gray pants with yellow lacing up the sides. He also had black boots and black fingerless gloves, and a dark gray beaded necklace. The second, a girl, looked very young with light green hair swept to her right, with teal eyes and fair complexion. She also wore 2 black facial markings on her cheeks. Reese also wore a dark purple hoodie over a mauve sweater along with black shorts as well as knee pads and elbow pads on her arms and legs. In addition, she had black shoelaced high-top sneakers. The last one was dark-skinned, got blue eyes, and had long pink hair tied back into a short ponytail, with a black undercut. His outfit was composed of a cream-colored short-sleeved jacket with yellow details and a black, long-sleeved V-neck shirt, with cream-colored fingerless gloves. He also had black medium-length pants and cream-colored sneaker. Harry, along with Blanche, the two were of course sitting together, had watched the fight with attention and had cheered Team Rwby. Afterwards, they all went to the fairgrounds of the festival to enjoy a good meal. On the way there, they came upon Emerald and Amber who were having a meal together. By the way they were looking at one another in the eyes, Harry could clearly say that they were deeply in love with one another. However, a quick glance around showed that Mercury Black was nowhere in sight. Because they were only three, Emerald and her two friends with the third one he had yet to meet had not been allowed to participate in the tournament. Mercury had been frustrated by this but couldn't do anything except sulking. As they walked, Weiss stopped when she heard her skull rigging and picked it up to see it was her mother, Willow, and she answered it happily. Ever since Jacques' death, things had turned to the better thanks to the dead man's wife. Harry learned that the day before, Willow met with the leader of the White Fang, Sienna Khan, and made peace. Even better, Willow promised to help the Faunus to gain even more right. Needless to say that Willow and Sienna became really good friends. It was even more surprising when Blake received a call from her parents who hold no grudges against her for joining the White Fang and leaving them behind. They were just happy that she was all right. How did they knew about where Blake was? Because Blake's father, who was the chieftain of Menagerie here, another princess for Team Rwby, was apparently present at the meeting. When he heard that his daughter was beacon and friend with the daughter of the current CEO of the Schnee Dust Company, he had been pretty shocked but happy. Anyway, back to present, as Weiss was chatting with her beloved mom, the little group went toward one of the huts where a saying, a simple walk. They all sat on the stools outside, all of them looked ready to order their soon-to-be meal. "I'll have a bowl of the regular, please." Yang was the first one to order and soon enough, a large bowl of noodles slided in front of her. Harry had to admit that the service here was really quick and, after a glance to his girlfriend, he saw in her appealing eyes that she was thinking the same. "Oh, I'll take the same." Ruby's voice echoed in the air, catching their attention. The two of them turned their heads just in time to see another large bowl of noodles slided this time in front of the youngest girl here, which her to clap her hands in excitement. Blanche and Harry shared an amused glance before refocusing back on the orders. Weiss, the Ice Queen of Team Rwby, had a concerned look on her face as she looked at the man, saying in a hesitant tone, "Do you have anything with a low salt?" In response, the man gave her a large bowl of noodles. Okay," the Ice Queen said with a sigh, looking at the food with an unsure look on her face. Blake, surprised both Harry and Blanche by simply nodding at the shopkeeper. The man returned the gesture before rushing through a door of his shop only to return a few seconds later with a large bowl of noodles topped with fish. The bowl slided toward Blake, who now literally had stars in her eyes as drools could be seen falling from the corner of her mouth. Harry shot a quick look at the fish before snorting as he looked back at the cat Faunus. It was tuna. Knowing that it was Blake's favorite fish, he shot her a knowing look before looking at Blanche. "You order first, milady," he cooed at her with a tiny grin. The white wolf Faunus giggled a bit at this before kissing his cheek, saying softly, "Thank you, noble sir." Turning her head toward the man who looked at the both of them with a soft smile on his face, Blanche opened her mouth to order. "I'll like a medium-sized ball with some lamb chops, please." The shopkeeper nodded at her before rushing again through the door. Once he returned, he handed her a medium-sized ball of noodles but toppled by 4 large lamb chops. "Too bad I'm not a sheep, Faunus. I would love to be your meal, gorgeous," Harry said with a chuckle as his eyes shined with mischief. Blanche shot her lover with a smirk before lowering her head closer to his right ear, whispering, "That can be arranged, love." With that said, she playfully bit his lob, causing him to gently push her face away with her hand. The other girls watched the scene with amusement, and even the shopkeeper seemed amused by their antics. Harry then turned away from his girlfriend to look at the man before opening his mouth to place his order. "I'll take the same as the lovely lady, but instead of lamb I will take salmon." As the shopkeeper went to retrieve his order, Harry turned his head to look at his girlfriend, who smirked at him as she said, "You really like salmon, don't you?" "Yep. Best fish in the world," our hero retorted with a smirk. However, a certain cat fauness shook her head in disapproval at his words. "While salmon is good, I think tuna is better," Blake said confidently from her seat. "It is not," Harry hissed back with narrowed eyes. "It is. It is not. It is. It is not. It is. It is not. It is. It is. It is not. Knew it. Salmon is better," Harry cried out with triumph, while Blake groaned in annoyance and frustration. "I can't believe I fell for that," the cat fauness grumbled as she banged her head repeatedly, much to the amusement of the others. Blanche patted her shoulder in fake sympathy, which caused Blake to shot her a brief glare before banging her head again. At first these two couldn't be in the same room without feeling awkward toward one another, but as the time passed, they grew comfortable to the point that they could chat peacefully. As the shopkeeper came back with Harry's food, Weiss then did something that surprised everyone. She handed the man a Schnee Dust Company card. "Ah, Weiss. What's the occasion?" Young asked her in shock. "Consider it thanks for sending me to the doubles round," the Ice Queen declared with a tiny smile. "It's nothing against you, Snow White, but I will pay for mine and my sweetheart's meal, thank you," Harry said with a smirk as he handed the shopkeeper a large bag of leans. Weiss's left eye twitched as she growled at him at the nickname, while around her, her teammates all laughed at this, while Blanche kissed her boyfriend on the mouth for being such a gentleman. Rwby was the loudest one, and the heiress shot her a deadpan expression before sighing deeply as she muttered, "I hate you all." Once those words escaped her mouth, she ignored the laughing people to retrieve her card as the shopkeeper handed it back to her. "Hey guys," a familiar voice echoed from nearby, and they turned their heads to see Team JNPR approaching them. "Hey guys, want to join us?" Rwby asked the newcomer with a bright smile. The members of Team JNPR glanced at one another before looking back at Rwby with smiles on their faces. Time skip. The meal was pretty good and everyone enjoyed it to its fullest until it was time for Team JNPR to fight. They fought against members of Shade Academy, whose team was called Team BRNZ, consisted of 3 brawlers, and Harry couldn't help but pointing while stating that it reminded him of a certain blonde and a sniper. In the hand, John and his team won, with Nora knocking her opponents out of the arena with this large hammer of hers. The next match had been interesting and funny, as it was a team from Shade against one of Haven equals NDGO versus SSSN. Why was it funny? Because Neptune, a member of Team SSSN alongside Sun Wukong, was discovered to have a strong fear of water, which was ironical seeing that his name came from the Roman god of sea. It was even more funny to discover that Neptune's weapon was a trident, just like the god in question. Harry had watched as the blue-haired guy used it to electrify 3 members of the opposing team in one fell swoop. The result? Team SSSN won the match against NDGO. After the match, Harry took Blanche to a little walk in the courtyard of Beacon, wanting some time alone with her. They were soon joined by Amber and Emerald, and it ended up becoming a chatting group. While the girls chatted, he only half listened as his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about how long he will wait before Salem would call him out, hopefully not too soon. However, his attention quickly changed when he saw an Atlesian airship landing meters away from his position. His emerald green eyes then caught the familiar figures of Weiss, Schnee and Rwby Rose approaching it just as the cockpit opened. From it stepped an older version of Weiss along with crimson-colored Atlesian knights and robotic Atlesian knights. Harry's eyes narrowed as he looked at the woman, and thanks to his powers, he could see her clearly. The older version of Weiss was a tall and fair-skinned young woman with slate blue eyes, black eyebrows, and long white hair. The latter of which was tied back in a bun high on the left side of the back of her head, along with bangs on the right side of her face. She also had a small curled lock of hair down the left just above her shoulder. Her outfit consisted of a white long-sleeved coat with a single dark blue clasp around the center waist alongside a red jeweled brooch on the collar. The coat's length ran down to her ankles and the sleeves were split from shoulder to elbow. She was also wearing a white pleated sleeveless blouse with a dark blue waistcoat. In addition, she had a pair of white trousers with dark blue garters along with a pair of gray thigh boots with black detailing around the knees. To finish the description, the young woman had a pair of black forearm-length gloves with gray trimmed cuffs. Back to present, Harry watched as the newcomer and Weiss started to speak before the former ordered her followers to leave for some reason. Once they did, the woman's face turned from cold to concern as she looked back at Weiss. Sadly, he was unable to hear anything because of the distance. However, he did notice the trio slowly walking toward the school. The two ice queens were still talking with one another. But then Harry's attention turned away from them to look at one of the robotic knights as a dark figure was standing behind it. As fast as wind, the android lost its head thanks to a man who kicked it away with his foot. "Hey!" the guy called out and the little group turned around to face him along with the people still present like Blanche, Amber, Emerald and himself. At the sight of the man, Emerald paled before whispering something in Amber's ears. "We must go," the Fall Maiden said to both Harry and Blanche, who nodded before watching as the two left the area. Harry knew why the green-haired young woman wanted to leave as he had recognized the guy. Thanks to the description he got from Salem and the memories he read the day he judged Cinder's soul, he knew that this guy was the one who prevented the hungry woman from taking the maiden's power, Crow Branwen. He was a fair-skinned man with dark spiky hair, faded red eyes, a red, tattered cloak and who was wearing a gray dress shirt with a long tail, black dress pants and black dress shoes. Harry had never met the man but from what he saw he wasn't impressed at all. At his side, Blanche's eyes narrowed at the guy, wondering who was he and what he was doing here. "Yeah, I'm talking to you, Ice Queen," Crow shouted to the Weiss and her sister with a little sneer. "Halt!" The unknown copy of Weiss ordered her followers whose rifles were pointed at the man, ready to shoot. "Excuse me. Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" Weiss angrily asked the man as she approaching him. However, much to Blanche's and Harry's surprise, the man placed an hand of the Ice Queen's face, saying in boredom, "SSSSSSSH not you." Once he finished talking, he pushed her out of the way before pointing at the older copy of Weiss, "You." Harry couldn't help but the grin from appearing on his face. This guy had guts for doing this to Weiss, the Ice Queen of Team Rwby. But then he saw a raven flying in the air, a very familiar raven. "I thought Weiss was the Ice Queen." Blanche's stunned voice caught his attention. "Oh, she is. But hey, we can still call her Ice Empress if the nickname is indeed taken," Harry retorted with a SHT grin on his face. The white wolf fauness shot him a toothy smirk of her own before saying in a purr-like tone, "You are so evil, love." "I aim to please gorgeous," our hero cooed back before kissing her on the kiss which she returned without hesitation. They kissed for a moment before Harry broke it so the two of them could approach the scene and the drama taking place meters away from them. Sure enough, they had missed something, but what was taking place right now was nothing but amusing. Why? Because the older version of Weiss was now facing the guy with Weiss standing at her side. "I don't have time for your immature games, Crow," the older woman hissed at the man who was confirmed to be Crow Branwen, Raven's brother. "Wait, you two know each other?" Weiss asked her with surprise but was ignored as the two were focused on one another. "Geez, you Atlas specialists think you're so special, don't you?" Crow asked with a mocking look on his face and in his tone. "It's in the title." The older Schnee hissed back with coldness. "Well, you know what you really are. A bunch of sellouts. Just like your boss. I'm not sure what you think you're implying, but I've heard enough. Now this is starting to be interesting." "Popcorn?" Harry asked his girlfriend as he lowered a bag of popcorn. "Don't ask where he got it," toward her. Blanche blinked at this before rolling her eyes in fond amusement at him as she picked up some popcorn to eat, still watching the drama taking place. Oh, I heard, too. I heard old Ironwood finally turned his back on Ojbin. Crow hissed to the older girl whose eyes narrowed at him dangerously. Ojbin? Weiss questioned with confusion only to be pushed aside by the older girl. Weiss, it's time for you to go. What dash? Listen to big sister, Weiss. She'll protect you. Just like Atlas is going to protect all of us, huh? Crow's voice was mocking as he sneered at Weiss's older sister. If you won't hold your tongue, then I will gladly remove it for you. The woman snarled in anger as she draws her sword, a single-edged, slightly curved blade. All right then, Crow began to say while slicking back some hair before adding with a smirk. Come take it. Soon enough, a fight broke between the two. The fight attracted some attention among them. Rwby, who approached her teammate with surprise and shock on his face. What's going on? She asked her partner as she went to stand beside her. She hadn't seen either Harry nor Blanche. Some crazy guy just started attacking my sister. Weiss hissed in response to her leader and partner. Rwby gasped in shock at those words before saying, oh no. Who would do such a th-? However, when she saw the guy, another gasp escaped her throat, this time not of shock but joy. That's my uncle. What? Weiss cried out in shock but was ignored as Rwby opened her mouth to scream loudly. Kick her peach, Uncle Crow. Harry and Blanche shared an amused glance at this, especially at the look Weiss had on her face as this until she surprised everyone by doing the same that her partner. Team him respect Winter. Winter? Her name is Winter. Geez, no wonder she looks so cold, Harry grumbled with a chuckle. Blanche, who heard him, snorted in amusement but agreed wholeheartedly. The two then watched as both Crow and Winter fought, and each blow's scent seemed to be stronger than the last. Winter's face showed nothing but rage as she glared at Crow, who looked as smug as a cat. Should we stop them from kill each other? Blanche hesitantly asked her lover after a few seconds. Should we? Harry asked her with a blink and a little whine. The white wolf fawness crossed her arms under her bust before narrowing her eyes at him, saying nothing as her yellow eyes locked with his green eyes. For a second, they looked at one another before Harry sighed with defeat. Fythien. But you own me, our hero grumbled to a triumphant-looking Blanche before dashing toward the fight, unsheathing his blades. Yes, he had them on him. At the same time, Crow and Winter were circling one another, waiting for the perfect moment to strike or waiting to know who was going to attack first. Winter was the one who charged with a scream of rage as she prepared a move toward her opponent just as Crow charged her with his scythe. Clank. Both opponents blinked at the sound, but then, their eyes widened when they saw a 17-years young man with messy black hair and emerald green eyes standing between the two with his blades blocking their weapons. You know, if the both of you wanted to have a lover quarrel, there were many other places for that, Harry told them cheekily as he glanced back and forth at the two. At those words, Crow and Winter blushed madly and started to splutter in denial until a large masculine voice echoed in the air. Schnee. It was General Ironwood with Penny behind him. Seeing the stern-looking general, Winter quickly pulled her blades away to face him to address him. General Ironwood, sir. What in the world do you think you're doing? Ironwood asked her angrily. He started the altercation, sir. That's actually not true. She attacked first. Crow responded from his place with his hands behind his head in a relaxed manner. If I remember correctly, old man, you were the one who provoked her, Harry commented with a smirk as he shot a sideway glance toward the man in question. Crow shot him a small glare, but it only caused him to grin wider. Winter, for her part, shot him a grateful look for defending her, and he nodded at her. Is that so? Ironwood asked Winter, who nodded her head in response. The general nodded back at her before looking back at Crow. And you? The man in question pointed to himself in mock confusion, much to some people's amusement. What are you doing here? I could be asking you the same thing. Crow retorted in a calm tone. Just as Ironwood looked ready to answer, Harry decided it was time for him to leave and loudly announced it. And with that, I'm out. With that said, he promptly walked away, whistling loudly while twirling his blades in his hands. Blanche shot an amused look toward Rwby and Weiss, who both had look of shock on their faces, before dashing after her lover, leaving the others behind. Once she reached him, Harry's arm grabbed her waist to pull her closer and she giggled at this gesture as he led her away from there to who knows where. The following days had been pretty busy not only for the students of Beacon Academy but for the representatives of the other schools as well, and all thanks to the vital festival tournament. After the arrival of Winter Schnee, Weiss was taken aside by her older sister for some personal moment, but more surprise arrived after that. The next day, early in the morning, 2 other airships arrived on Beacon's grounds. From the first one came out a fair-skinned woman with slate-blue eyes whose white hair were tied up in a bun, low on the right side of the back of her head. Her bangs were shaped around the left side of her face and a small, curled lock of hair reaching almost to her shoulders. Her entire outfit was colored navy blue, white and gray, consisting of a white coat with sleeves that expose her upper arms, a red-lined high collar and a red brooch. Thanks to the number of times she had been seen on the news, Harry and Blanche had both recognized her. She was the husband of the former CEO of the Schnee Dust Company SDC and the mother of Winter and Weiss, Willow Schnee. Of course, she was followed by some Atlesian soldiers who seemed to act as her bodyguards. Needless to say that both Weiss and Winter had been surprised but delighted by her arrival. The reunion was sweet and Blanche even wiped a tear out of her eye. From the second airship, came out a group of Faunus people, but 2 of them had caught Harry's attention. One was a tall, muscular man with black hair, a thick beard and yellow eyes who was wearing an open dark violet coat with white fur trim at the top, exposing a patch of black fur on his chest. Over his beige-colored pants was a matching sash that seemed to wrap around his waist and was secured with a large, silver metal buckle. On his coat more precisely at the shoulder was a silver metal spalder, which threw a pair of curved strppd across the chest attachés as a clasp. His black leather boots with white toes had a shape reminiscent of paws with claws at the tips. Generally, the man looked to be quite hairy as, from what hairy of his bare arms and the backs of his wrists, we could clearly see that he was covered in thick, black fur. Lastly, the guy seemed to possess retractable panther claws in his fingertips. The other one was without a doubt female with a fair skin, black hair, a pair of black cat ears on her head and yellow eyes. She looked to be a carbon copy of Blake. Harry understood right here that the 2 were her parents. Blake's mom was wearing a black hakama and sandals with white tabby socks. Over her attire, she wore a black shrug with a long right sleeve and a short left sleeve, gold leaf trim adorning the opening on the front. Along with that, she had long, black arm warmers that seemed to extend to the middle finger. The left warmer had a purple band tied around the top and a pair of gold bangles around the wrist. Finally, around her waist, there was a black and gold sash that trails behind her, with a gold flower-shaped buckle at the end. Like Willow, they came with some guards to escort them. Regardless of this, he had been the one to greet them along with Blanche as Blake was somewhere else at the time. At first wary of him, he took him a minute to explain who he was and they chatted for a bit before he led them toward where Blake could be. Gyra and Callie Belladonna were really nice fellows who came here to see their beloved daughter, which was understandable. They tried to come earlier but couldn't thanks to Gyra's position as chieftain of Menagerie. While they walked, Callie and Blanche hadn't stopped chatting with one another as the former was curious as it wasn't common for a faunus to be in love with a human. Gyra and Harry, for their parts, discussed over other things such as how was life in Menagerie or how it was to be chieftain etc., but it was mainly about Blake and how her life at Beacon was. After a moment, the little group stood in front of Team Rwby's room where Harry knocked at the door. It was Rwby who answered, and after a short explanation from her friend, she told them that the cat Faunus was in the library as she wanted to let her and Young have some time with Crow. Harry thanked her before he led the group toward the library where they indeed found the girl. Blake, after Blanche called out her name, had been shocked to see her parents, but it was heartwarming to see them hugging one another tightly. Harry and Blanche had shot each other a brief glance before leaving the place. Why? Because they didn't want it to intrude on such a personal moment. The following days had been also pretty interesting to say the least. Amber and Emerald went on many dates and we could clearly see that they were a couple but didn't made it official yet. Harry, however, felt like something was wrong. Why? Because one day, he saw the two kissing each other in a corridor under the eyes of Ojban. Harry was surprised that the old man hadn't tried anything and decided to keep an eye on him for good measure. Crow Branwen had come to speak to him barely a day or two after their first meeting. The guy told him that he had guts for stepping in a fight between professionals but that he will pay for his little stunt. Harry had only smirked at the guy, responding that he will wait and see. Of course, he had made sure to keep an eye on Yang's and Ruby's uncle, as he was the only one beside him and Amber at Beacon to know who helped Cinder in attacking the Fall Maiden. Speaking of which, it had been a while since he last saw Mercury, and after some research, he discovered that he had been arrested by some Atlesian soldiers on Ironwood's orders. Even better, he heard that Arthur Watts and Tyrion Kalos also got caught, but the latter died because he tried to escape. Thanatos had loved sending the guy to oblivion for his crimes. Crow must have told his allies about how Amber's attackers looked like, and Mercury must have told Ironwood who he worked with, but how come Emerald was still around? Ojban had seen her, but why wasn't she arrested yet? He didn't know, but he will discover it one way or another. A part of that, the tournament was going smoothly. Russell Thrush and Sky Lark from Team CDRL were defeated by Penny Polandina, Ruby's friend, and later, Yang and Weiss had to fight against two people from Atlas Academy named Neon Cat and Flint Coat from Team FNKI. The first one, Neon, was a young girl with a light complexion with sea green eyes and moderate red-orange hair with light blue streaks in her bangs. Waving behind her, was a pink cat-like tail, showing that she was a faunus. The girl wore a light blue cropped tank top over a dark purple BR, showing her upper melons along with dark purple short shorts under a pink combat miniskirt and white belt with a yellow winking smiley face on the buckle. Two buttons could be seen fixed to her tank top over her right BRST, one purple with a cat design and another green one with a heart. Her hair was done up in two pigtails. The other one, Flint, was a young, dark-skinned man with dark brown eyes who wore rectangular sunglasses and a dark fedora with a blue trim on his head as well as an earring on his right ear. His outfit consisted of a dark vest over an untucked white dress shirt, with a loose tie wrapped around the collar. Completing his attire was a pair of dark dress pants, silver dress shoes and a dark glove on his left hand. The two of them had instantly started to antagonize Yang and Weiss, one because of her look and the other because the SDC was running Daddy's dust shop. Neon and Flint, at first, had the upper hands, but in the hand, Yang and Weiss won the match. Of course, the two of them were congratulated by their friends and a little party who thrown afterwards. Harry had voiced his disappointment at not being able to participate in the tournament, but apparently didn't mind it as it gave him time to be with the hottest goddess on Remnant, which had of course, caused Blanche to give him the mother of all kisses. After the fight, Team RWBY, mostly Ruby, Yang and Weiss got to meet Blake's parents and the meeting went perfectly. Gyra took a liking to the leader of the team as she was too sweet and innocent for her own good, while Callie was discussing with Yang and Weiss. The cat Faunus went as far as asking them if Blake managed to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend yet. From what he heard from Yang, Blake was as red as a tomato and hadn't stopped spluttering in embarrassment. A part of Harry was glad to not have parental figures anymore, or he would have suffered the same fate. While Harry was dealing with the tournament and personal thoughts, a certain someone in the land of darkness was still silent as she waited for the perfect moment to strike. Thanatos had asked her about what she planned to do, and her only answer was that Hazel will use the virus Emerald inserted in the system. However, she didn't tell him what she had in mind at first, at least because after threatening her with a little portion of his aura, Salem revealed that she will wait until the very end of the tournament before Hazel would activate the virus. Once activated, the broadcast will show a video of the Queen of Grimwood will reveal to the entire world what Ozma and his inner circle had been hiding for years before revealing the relics. Thanatos had listened to her words in silence, but once she finished, he only nodded his head in acceptance as a feeling of excitement passed through his body. Soon, the twin gods will be back and he would show what happened when you play with forces that aren't yours. Once he returned to the underworld, we came face to face with Summer, who asked him when she will get to see her beloved daughters again. The embodiment of death calmly responded that she will soon, which had calmed the woman a bit. While the two were discussing plans and other stuffs, at Beacon, the strongly anticipated finals round of the tournament begun. The finalists were Tang Xiaolong, Sun Wukong, Penny Polandina, Pira Nikos, Coco Adele, and 3 others he didn't know or care to know about. The fights had been long and hard, but only 4 remained in the end: Yang, Coco, Pira and Penny. In the minds of many people present, the winners this time would be the students of Beacon Academy. Of course, the remaining 4 trained hard to be prepared for the battles. Pira was helped by her favorite training partner, Harry, while Yang was helped by her own teammates. Our hero and his lovely girlfriend Blanche, along with Ren, John, Nora and the rest of Team Rwby had been there when Yang fought against Pira, cheering for the two of them. However, much to everyone's lack of surprise, the result was quite easy to guess. The redhead won with slight difficulty, but she won. The fight between Coco and Penny was also a sight to see, but in the end, the Atlas girl won. The finalists now were Pira and Penny. Of course, Harry had told Thanatos, who had told Salem. The Queen of Grimm had smiled at this, but then dropped him the bombshell: everything will start during this fight. Who do you think will win? Harry asked his girlfriend as the two of them were in the fairgrounds of the festival, sitting on some benches. Pira, obviously, don't get me wrong, Penny is a remarkable fighter, but well, with Pira's semblance, Blanche answered with a tiny smile. The two of them had decided to have another time for themselves before assisting the next match. However, Harry also wanted this because he knew that later, his life will change entirely for the better or worse. True, look like Beacon is gonna win after all, Harry retorted with a soft chuckle and a raised brow. So it seems, the White Wolf Faunus answered back with a nod. Blanche, I have to tell you something, our hero began to say in a soft tone. His words seemed to make her curious as she turned her head to look at him, yellow eyes locked into emerald green. What is it, dear? She asked him gently with a face showing nothing but concern. With a hand, he cupped her head before saying with nothing but love and sincerity, I want you to know that you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and regardless of what will happen, I will always love you as you are my light in the darkness. Blanche looked stunned at those words, but she would be lying to herself if she said she wasn't touched by them. However, her mind went blank as she processed the middle part of his sentence. Regardless of what will happen, I will always love you. He was speaking as if he was going to kick the bucket. Harry, what are you saying? The White Wolf Faunus asked him, full of concern now thanks to his words. Our hero shot her a look of pain and hesitation before opening his mouth to answer, only to be interrupted by the sound of someone approaching them. Turning his head, the duo saw Amber and Emerald running toward them, and the former had an alarmed look on her face. Amber? Emerald? What's with the face? Is something wrong? Harry asked them with worry as he pulled his hands away from Blanche's face. Harry! Blanche! You have to help me stop the fight. Amber cried out to them alarmingly as sweat fell down her face. What? Why? Blanche asked her friend with shock, surprise, and confusion. Because if Penny fights Pira, she will die. Emerald was the one who answered. Emerald had become really much more than she was before. Thanks to her relationship with Amber, she became even more open with her feelings, but didn't tell anyone about who she worked for or who worked with her. And why that? The White Wolf Faunus asked the green-haired girl with narrowed eyes of confusion and alarm. Because Penny is an android. Amber answered after catching her breath. Amber didn't know that the gods will arrive soon, as both Harry and Thanatos agreed that she didn't need her to worry about that, as she was having a great time with Emerald. What? Blanche and Harry cried out at the same time in shock and stupor. The latter was also frustrated. No wonder the girl always seemed cheerful and happy. No human would be that excited. Well, scratch that, some human could be like that. Cough Ruby Rose cough. Cough Nora Valkyrie cough. Also no wonder he heard no heartbeats from her. Being an android, a creature of metal, she doesn't need a heart. How do you know? Blanche's voice stopped him in his thought and he looked back at not only her but Amber and Emerald as well. "Well, you see," the green-haired girl began to say with hesitation clear in her tone but was stopped by her lover. "It doesn't matter. Right now we have a fight to stop." "Right." Emerald, Harry, and Blanche all cried out at the same time before the little group rushed toward away from the fairgrounds. However, as they ran, Blanche couldn't stop glancing at the love of her life as she was still pondering his words from earlier. What is he hiding? She thought to herself with suspicions and concern as she ran beside him. Time skip. It took them a moment but the little group of four managed to reach the Amity Coliseum thanks to a kind pilot who allowed them to climb on his bullhead after the situation was explained to him. The airship then stopped near the highest docking bays where usually publics came out of their bullheads. "Thank you, sir." Amber and Blanche thanked the man before dashing away, following by Emerald and Harry. The four friends ran toward the seating area where the public was. There they saw the stadium where many people were sitting around a round arena where two familiar forms facing each other could be seen in the middle of it, Penny and Pyrrha. "There they are!" Blanche cried out while pointing at the two fighters who had thankfully not started the combat. Harry began to say only for a voice to interrupt them. "Hey guys, what's the hurry?" Turning their heads, they saw the familiar form of Ruby Rose approaching them with concern on her face. "Ruby! We came to stop this fight." Harry responded to the red teen who blinked in surprise before saying in an equal tone. "You too?" "Yes. Now we have to hurry if we don't want to deal with an accidental murder." Blanche responded in alarm and those words caused the younger girl present to widen her eyes in equal alarm. "Right. But how did you know Penny was an android?" "Emerald told us how she knew is beyond me though," the white wolf faunus grumbled the last part suspiciously while eyeing the green-haired girl. Harry and Amber worriedly glanced at one another before looking back at the trio. "I think it is best if we go now everyone," our hero commented while looking down at the arena where we could see Penny and Pyrrha circling each other. As the four approached, Pyrrha was dodging Penny's attack before deflecting another one with a serious look on her face. Penny frowned as she threw her arms forward ready to launch her swords at her opponents. Seeing this, Harry's eyes widened before using his powers to move faster to soon becoming a blur figure. Penny's swords were launched toward Pyrrha who managed to defend herself with her shield. The android's eyes narrowed at this and launched herself forward just as Pyrrha charged her with a battle cry while holding her own sword in her hand. Clank. The sound of clashing blades echoed in the air but in the audience, gasps of shock erupted as everyone widened their eyes in surprise and disbelief. Pyrrha and Penny were equally stunned when they saw someone standing between them, using swords to block their blades. The someone was none other than Harry James Potter whose face showed nothing but sternness as he looked back and forth between the two of them. "Harry," the redhead called out in shock as her emerald green eyes looked at him. Penny was too stunned to say anything as her eyes were locked on him, unable to comprehend what was going on. Harry, instead of answering Pyrrha, used this moment of surprise to make a 360, taking both girls with him in one swift movement. Pyrrha and Penny both grunted as they impacted against the ground before slowly going back on their feet. "What did you do that?" Pyrrha asked him with slight anger and shock as she now stood on her feet. Penny didn't say anything but her eyes said it all. Harry opened his mouth to answer but someone prevented him from doing so. "To save both of your life, Pyrrha." Penny and the redhead turned their heads to see Amber, Emerald, Blanche and Ruby rushing toward them. In the seats, the public was watching the scene with a stunned silence, wondering what was going on. Even the announcers. "What do you mean?" Penny asked the newcomers with confusion. Ruby stepped forward to speak. "Pyrrha, if you use your semblance on her, she will die." The redhead and the android blinked at this before glancing at one another and looking back at the group. "How come?" Ruby opened her mouth to answer but Harry interrupted her by answering bluntly, "Because she is an android and your semblance is polarity." "Harry!" Amber and Blanche cried out to him with fire in their eyes. "What?" he asked them innocently. "You had to say it like that," the former asked him with a growl while crossing her arms over her bust. Honestly? Yes, there was no other way to say it, you know. Harry answered calmly with a raised eyebrow. Blanche, Emerald, and Amber looked at him blankly for a moment before slapping their heads with a hand in perfect synchronization, muttering something under their breaths. There is always a better way to say things, Rwby gently said to Harry, who only shrugged before retorting calmly. I prefer the blunt approach, much more efficient if you ask me. Pyrrha and Penny, for their parts, were staring at the newcomers, mostly at Harry with shock before looking at each other in horror. If their friends didn't come, then Penny would have been accidentally destroyed and Pyrrha would be seen as a murderer. In the audience, people looked equally shocked by this turn of events, and many started to whisper about Ironwood being a cheat for allowing an android to participate. Harry, who was sheathing his blades, suddenly froze when he heard a voice in his head. It is time. It was Thanatos' voice. Barely a second later, everyone present in the Colosseum noticed that the cameras started to malfunction as the images disappeared. Soon enough, after a few seconds, the images coming from the broadcast suddenly tinted an ominous bright red, with a piece hovering over the scene before revealing the face of a laughing woman Harry instantly recognized. As he glanced around the Colosseum, Harry could clearly see the look of shock, terror, and fright from the various people present. Back to the screen, Salem laughed for a few more seconds before looking at them with a dark smirk on her face. Greeting, people of Remnant. For those who don't know me, I am Salem, the Queen of Grimm. Salem's first words caused a wave of reactions from the crowd sitting in the Colosseum. Fear. Stupor. Disbelief. Terror. Harry James Potter could detect it all just by looking at the face of the many people gathered around him. Even his friends in Team Rwby and JNRP looked at the screen with wide eyes of shock and horror, not that he could blame them, as it wasn't every day that the Queen of Grimm herself revealed herself to the world. Many people here didn't even know of her existence, and Harry could clearly imagine the face Ojpin was making at the moment, especially since he knew that everyone on Remnant could see the pale Grimm-like woman thanks to the medias. And he was right, because everywhere in Remnant, every single person scattered all around the world was watching their screens with disbelief and shock, even the people of Menagerie. Back to Amity, Salem stopped her speech to stare at everyone present with a dark grin on her face, which was surprising considering that she was not really there, before opening her mouth to resume. Many of you are probably skeptical about my claim, but I can assure you I am truly what I said. For so many millenniums now, I was living in this world. I was there when humanity was at its greatness, and I was also there when those despicable gods destroyed every single human on his planet for defying them. The Queen of Grimm took another pause as she let the crowd and every people elsewhere watching a screen processing what they were hearing before going on calmly. Today you are nothing more than a mere shadow of what had been the headmasters, who are acting as your guardians, knew of my existence, and yet they hide it from all of you. After those words left her lips, Harry was not surprised to literally feel the anger radiating from everyone present in the Colosseum. At his side, as expected, Pyrrha and Penny were looking at the screen with shock and fright, while Blanche was as pale as ghost as her yellow eyes were locked on Salem with an expression of shock, denial, and horror. Harry felt sympathetic toward her, as she knew nothing of the entire situation. He would have told her, but he couldn't. He regretted it, but it was necessary. Emerald looked resigned, while Amber was looking at the sky with a calm look on her face. After all, a part of him, Amber was among the few people Raven, Summer, Hazel, Arthur, Taeyong, Tyrion, etc. to know what will happen, and so wasn't really surprised by the sudden appearance. Then our hero's emerald eyes returned to the screen when Salem spoke again. If I'm speaking to you now, it's to let you all know what is really going on. People like Ojpin tried to hide the fact the Four Kingdoms are at the brink of war and yet leave everyone in the dark. If I'm here today, it is to denounce this injustice. A dark grin grew on her face at the last words before she opened her mouth to add with pleasure, but I'll Soto tell you something dear Ojpin has been hiding from all of you. Even his inner circle. Murmurs of confusion started to be heard from every corner of the Colosseum as many narrowed their eyes at the screen, wondering what she meant. Pyrrha, Penny, Rwby, and Blanche acted like everyone present, even if the last two still looked a bit pale. But the curiosity could be seen shining in their eyes. Ozpin and me had been husband and wife so many millenniums ago and had both been cursed with immortality. What? The crowd roared out in anger and shock as they looked at the screen with disbelief. I have been cursed because I wanted to save the man I loved. Later, humankind stood up against their creators and to punish them. For this act, the gods annihilated them all, leaving no one but me. Salem added with a somewhat sad look on her face. Everyone who heard this fell silent as they didn't know what to say. However, Harry could clearly see that some people had a look of sympathy of their faces as they looked at the Queen of Grimm. Blanche was among those people along with Amber and Ruby. Pyrrha, Emerald and Penny were frozen in shock as if they were still processing what they just heard, not that he could blame them. Many centuries later, civilization rebuilt and I met Ozma again. I didn't know then that he had been tasked by the god of light himself to destroy me. During a fight, I accidentally killed our daughters and this accident caused a feud between us. Many women now looked at Salem with nothing but pure pity, especially as everyone could hear how her voice almost broke at the mentions of her daughters. Harry promised to himself to at least allow her to see them again before sending her to the limbo. But today, this millennium's old feud ends once and for all. Salem's new words caused many people to blink in confusion as they wondered what she meant. Smirking darkly, the Queen of Grimm closed her eyes as she clapped her hands together before slowly spreading her arms as if hugging someone. Except that she was not going to hug someone. In front of her, much to everyone's surprise and astonishment, four objects appeared in thin air: an ornate crown with jewels embedded throughout, a golden ornamented lamp with a blue sphere in the middle, a golden ornamented staff with a blue spearhead-shaped crystal on top, and lastly, an ornate sword. Harry glanced around and saw that many people were frowning at the objects, and he couldn't help but internally smirking at the look of confusion on their faces. Elsewhere at Beacon Academy, Ozpin was watching what was happening from his seat. When his ex-wife appeared on the screen, he had been shocked to the core as he didn't expected this, but when she started talking his face turned paler. Until then, he had managed to hide his true identity, but all thanks to the Queen of Grimm herself, it all was for nothing. However, when she said that their feud was about end, he became confused as he didn't know what it means. Until she summoned four objects. Four objects he instantly recognized and filled him with nothing but horror and shock. Why? Because those objects were none other than the four relics the god of light gave him many centuries ago. No! He cried out in shock as he jumped out of his seat, his eyes glued on the sight of the artifacts. In his mind, he was wondering how did she manage to get her hands on the relics and how long did she had them. The first question was the one who bothered him the most. Sure, he knew that she somehow managed to get the one from Vale, but the others? How did she manage to get the one from Atlas? It was the relic that allowed the city to stay in the air, and yet, he hadn't heard anything about it crashing on the mainland. She must have help from people who knew about the relics. But who? Shaking his head to get rid of those thoughts, the headmaster of Beacon decided it was time to leave his office as fast as possible. The identity of the ones who helped his ex-wife could wait. From now, he had to stop her from using the relics. He knew that the gods, if summoned now, would destroy every single creatures on this planet again. He couldn't allow it. As he left the elevator, he met up with Glinda and Crow, who were looking at a scroll. Glinda's with shock clear on her face. Glinda. Crow. We must go to the city now, the headmaster ordered his deputy headmistress in a stern tone. The blonde teacher and the Reaper both blinked in surprise at the sudden order but nodded before the three of them quickly left the area. Unknown to the people at Amity Coliseum, the negative emotions they radiated because of the revelations had attracted a colossal amount of creatures of Grimm. Same for the rest of the world, but it was Vale that was interesting us as the barrier protecting it was destroyed not long ago by Roman and the BL Like I said earlier, today marks not only the end of the feud between Ozpin and myself but also the beginning of a new era. With those relics, the gods will return and the fate of Remnant will be decided. Salem said through loudly with some pleasure before the screens cut from red and black to complete static. For a moment, nothing could be heard from the stage as everyone were staring at the screens with stupor, shock and disbelief. Harry released a silent sigh as he glanced at the people with him who all looked as shocked as everyone present. Well, except Emerald and Amber that it. Looking at his side, he saw Blanche still looking at the screens with stupor and anger clear on her face and in her yellow eyes. Harry once again felt a pang of regret for not telling her anything and opened his mouth to say something but then. Alert! Incoming Grim attack. Threat level, 9. Please seek shelter in a calm and orderly manner. Why am I not surprised? Our hero muttered to himself while slapping his face with a hand. Hearing this, everything went wild when the crowd began to scream in panic while fleeing the scene as fast as they could through the exit tunnels. Suddenly Ironwood's annoying voice was heard echoing from the megaphones. Ladies and gentlemen, please, there is no need for panic. But as soon as those words were said, a giant Nevermore appeared above the arena's domed force field before giving a series of deafening screeches as it tried to destroy the barriers with its beak and claws. Seeing the large black bird, Sun Wukong, who was standing beside Coco, went on his feet before shouting out loud in disbelief. A Nevermore? How did it get past the kingdom's defenses? Coco asked back loudly as she lowered her glasses a bit to look at the dark bird. It wasn't alone, Ren inquired as he rose from his seat as well. Harry, was eyeing the Nevermore with a glare that could melt ice before unleashing his semblance. The massive black bird instantly froze in terror as its eyes landed on our hero. Leave, you overgrown turkey. Harry snarled coldly and the Nevermore quickly flew away with a caw of fright. Once the dark creature was gone, he turned his head to look at everyone present. We need to go now. Why? Nora and Rwby asked him with a look of confusion. I don't know, maybe because people are about to die because a grim attack. Harry retorted sarcastically before looking at the others. I'm going down there and fight. If you want to join me, then you are welcome. Pyrrha, Rwby, Penny, the rest of Team JNPR and some other people present all looked at one another before looking back at him with serious expressions on their faces. Are you with me, everyone? He called out loudly while raising one of his swords in the air. Yes, came the loud response before everyone rushed toward where the bullheads were. Thankfully, there were still some left, so they climbed in one before the airship flew away from Amity Coliseum toward Vale. Of course, they took different airships, seeing that one won't be able to contain everyone. Team JNPR along with Rwby, Amber, Emerald, Blanche and himself will go to one airship, while the others, Team CFVY, Team SSSN, Team ABRN, Team FNKI etc. will take the other remaining airships available. From the windows, everyone watched with horror and shock as a large amount of Grim entered the city, all heading toward Beacon Academy. Harry, however, knew why Salem had sent her Grim despite having the relics. It had been decided that the creatures would be used to distract the people to give her the time to come to Vale herself. Thankfully, Thanatos and her both agreed that innocent lives will not be risked. The Grim will not kill anyone, well, not the citizens but the members of the BLD Fangs. From what he heard, Taurus and his men planned to attack the city during the whole thing, and so both Thanatos and Salem decided to kill two birds with one stone. The BLD Fang will be the only ones to die, and maybe some androids minus Penny. They won't be missed after all. And once the Queen of Grim will arrive, the defenders will be far too exhausted to stop her from using the relics, all thanks to them trying their best to protect the innocents. Shaking his head to regain his composure, he listened as Blanche was talking with the pilot. Harry couldn't help but smiling fondly at his lover, as she was even hotter when she was angry. Hurry up and land this airship already, she snarled at the poor guy, who cowered a bit at her behavior but, because of the fear, quickly did what he was told as he stopped above a small building before opening the cockpit. Thank you, Rwby said to the man before she and everyone else all stepped out of the bullheads. What are you going to do, sir? John asked him before stepping outside. I will stay around and help as much as I can. Good luck out there, young ones, the pilot said back to them, and once everyone was out, they all watched as the pilot and his airship flew away from there, leaving them behind. Once the airship was out of sight, they all looked around and were horrified by the sight of Grim invading the city and attacking the innocent citizens. Well, it looks fun, Harry said out loud with a little whistle. The others stared at him blankly at those words while Blanche and Amber released amused chuckles. Only you, love, only you, the former replied with fond exasperation while Amber nodded in agreement. What can I say? I'm unique, Harry replied with a mock-arrogant tone while puffing his chest proudly. Snorts of amusement echoed from the group before they looked back at the devastation in the streets, their faces turning grim and somber. I bet I will kill more grim than you, Harry playfully said to his friends with a toothy grin on his face. Oh really? Blanche and Amber all asked back with smirk of their own. Nora and Ruby had matching expressions on their faces as they readied their weapons, clearly joining in the game. Penny, Pyrrha, Ren, Emerald and John glanced at one another before shrugging as they pulled out their weapons. All of them were now looking at the Grim, wondering who will jump down there first, but then. Hey, look, it's Ojbin! Harry suddenly cried out while pointing at a random direction. They all turned their heads to look at where he was pointing. Ha! I got you! Harry said to them cheekily before jumping off the building they were on with his swords in his hands. He landed right on top of an alpha Beowulf, killing it with his sword before attacking another Grim with a battle cry. That's cheating! Ruby cried out in slight anger before jumping after him, quickly following by Nora, Blanche and Amber. The others stayed behind, staring blankly at where their comrades stood a few seconds ago. Well, maybe we should join them? Ren asked after a moment of silence as he watched his friends fighting the hordes of Grim invading the streets. We should. John, Pyrrha and Emerald said in perfect synchronization before jumping off the building alongside Ren, leaving behind Penny. I'm combat ready, the android girl cried out in excitement before following after her friends to engage the Grim. While our friends were fighting, elsewhere, the other teams who also left the Colosseum were now engaging the invaders, protecting the innocents from the creatures of Grim attacking them. At the same time, Gyra Belladonna, who was with his wife Callie and Blake along with Weiss Schnee, also sent his men to fight alongside hunters and huntresses of Beacon while Ojbin, Glinda, Crow, and the rest of the staff Professor Port and Oblek left the Colosseum to join the fight were protecting the school. Everywhere around Vale, it was nothing but a huge battlefield with people either fighting for their life or protecting the citizens as best as they could. The Grim, them, were terrorizing the people of Vale and everyone around Remnant could see it. This day, not only will it be written, but also will be known forever as the Battle of Beacon. Meanwhile, far away from there, someone was making her way toward Vale. The figure was none other than Salem, the Queen of Grim herself. She had left the relics in her castle as it would be too annoying to carry them all the way there. Escorting her, where a large amount of Grim consisted of bearing elves, manticores, sabbers, ursas and beowulfs. Where did she got those Grim? From Mountain Glen, where an old Grim was sleeping. If she hadn't met Thanatos, she would have used it, but now it was useless. She went there to make sure it wouldn't wake up and to get an SCRT as she approached a hostile territory. As she walked closer and closer to her objective, Salem couldn't help but smirking in both excitement and pleasure as soon, because not only will she face Ojbin again after a long time, but also because today, the gods will be summoned. After millenniums of disappearance, they were about to return, but this time, instead of humanity and Faunus kind being annihilated, it will be the gods themselves who will meet their doom by the hands of a being of whom no one suspects having a physical envelope. Thanatos, the embodiment of death itself. Ever since she met him a few years ago, Salem had seen him as a god unlike the beings that she used to worship a long time ago. The twin brothers were arrogant and haughty who were ready to destroy their creations if they dared to oppose them. They were no gods but tyrants in Salem's eyes. But Thanatos, he wasn't like those two. Sure, he was powerful, strong, intimidating, but the embodiment of death was also compassionate, caring, amusing from time to time and noble both in heart and behavior. Thanatos/Harry might be one of the most powerful beings in existence, if not the most powerful, but yet, he didn't try to push his way to the people he met. Sure, he could intimidate them, but not once did he force someone to do as he said. Instead, he gave others chances to do what they want. In short, he valued people's free will. Unlike the twin gods who you must either listen to them or be destroyed. Salem smiled as she remembered what her mother used to tell her a long time ago and had to admit it was appropriate to describe Thanatos, death was always fair. After all, death is what happened to everybody, not matter what or who you are, faunus or humans, animals or plants, everything die in the end, as death is the only fair thing in this world, the only thing every living creatures had in common. Shaking her head to regain her composure, the Queen of Grimm decided to focus back on the present and her current mission, heading to Vale. To Beacon Academy. To Ojban. Sighing deeply, she glanced at her Grimm SCRT before resuming her walk with a calm look on her face. At the same time, sitting on his throne, Thanatos was waiting for the Queen of Grimm to summon him. Looking at the ceiling of his palace, the embodiment of death allowed a toothy smirk to grew on his face. Soon you will both meet you and, he whispered to himself, but his voice echoed in the hall as elsewhere, in an unknown place, two beings were shivering slightly in fear. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 6. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Asian Lionheart 310 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.